everybody, it's Saitama here, your father. Today is a very serious topic. It's a topic that I want to discuss because it doesn't matter how old you are or how young you are or whatever age you are, there is never not a reason to discuss this topic because this is very serious and it matters to me a lot. Now, with any type of videos like this, especially if it's a reaction to something like this, if you're a YouTuber out there, this is just how I feel, and if you're a big YouTuber and you're doing a reaction video for this, do not monetize yourself. I am appalled by people that do reaction videos to garner views, to be able to monetize. So I will make sure, no matter what, throughout my entire YouTube career, if I ever have to talk about something as like this that you guys are going to see, you can bet your butts that I'm not going to be doing any advertising, any monetization. These are going to be just freely to discuss this because this is super serious to me. And it resonates really deeply because I have tried to die by suicide many times before. It's really important that we discuss this properly, and money should never be a factor. Anyways, we're gonna go and see the video. I'm gonna pause when I need to, and let's just get started.
I never thought that I would ever have to make a video like this. And this is definitely going to be the hardest video that I've ever had to make. If you haven't heard, my husband, Landon Clifford, has passed away. It took a while for me to obviously get over the initial shock, which I still feel like I'm in shock, and to just gather my feelings and my thoughts, and to feel like I'm ready to tell his story, because it's a very important story to be told, and it is my job to tell it, but it's not an easy story to tell at all. Before you watch this video, I want you to know that this is going to be very, very hard to hear. If you are easily triggered, I wouldn't watch this video. Even if you're not easily triggered, if you think this video might affect you in a negative way, I don't think you should watch it. We're going to be talking about addiction and suicide and depression. And these are very, very heavy topics.
Yeah, so I deal with depression every day. Emily deals with my depression every day. And the scariest thing is, if she hadn't been there for me during my worst times, she might have been the one making this video right now, along with this unfortunate person who doesn't deserve what happened, but also is just trying their best to survive through this, because this is heartbreaking. This is absolutely heartbreaking because I see myself as being the one that's gone. I can see that. That's scary. That's absolutely terrifying. So she's a brave soul for doing this.
If you are of a young age, I highly recommend having a parent watch this video first and then asking them if they think it's okay for you to watch it. And if they say yes, maybe watching it with them so you can talk with them about it and they can kind of talk you through some of the more confusing, difficult questions that you might have. If you are younger, please, please, please do not watch this without parental supervision, and I ask that they watch it all the way through before making a decision on whether or not you should watch it.
I agree with her. I do believe that there is a need for maybe some parental guidance, but I also believe that you guys need to be able to be introduced to topics like these, because this is reality. Whether you like it or not, this is what you're going to be dealing with. So you have to be willing, or you have to be able to learn these things. So for the parents out there, I strongly suggest that if you are on the fence, I would recommend this, because being able to talk about this opens up a line of communication with your child that I didn't have. And not being able to express your feelings and talk about things like this is what happened to me and why I closed off and why I struggled so much in my life. So I just hope that you don't make the same mistake as my parents.
Landon has always had his issues mentally. He's someone that is not as open about it. I share everything with you guys, and I've always been very open about my struggles with depression and anxiety, and that's just me. I get a lot of comfort in talking to you guys about those kinds of things. One, knowing that there's so many people out there who love me and support me, and to just know that it's helping someone else who might go through the same thing, or at least a similar thing, and for that person to be able to relate and to feel like they're not alone. Landon is a very quiet, secretive person, especially when it comes to sharing deep emotional things with the world. He would hardly share them with me or his family or his friends, let alone everyone, which is fine. You don't have to share everything with everyone if you don't want to. So I always did my best to try and respect that. So behind the scenes, he was always just kind of going through his own stuff that he just didn't really feel comfortable with sharing. And he has had mental health issues for as long as I have known him. He suffered from anxiety and depression. He has ADHD, which he has had since he was a little boy. So his whole life, he's always just kind of struggled with his emotions and just the way his brain was wired. Around the time that I got pregnant with Delilah, he kind of started falling into a depression. I don't think the two are correlated whatsoever. We tried for Delilah. She was in an accident, and we both came to the mutual decision that we wanted another baby at that time. But there was other things going on with our lives that we didn't really talk about. Many factors just kind of contributed to the fact that his mental health just wasn't really great at the time. So he went to see a psychiatrist. It's not his first time visiting a psychiatrist. When he was younger, all throughout elementary school and middle school, he took ADHD medication. He stopped taking it in high school. He just didn't really like the way it felt. But he was starting school online, so he wanted to get back on that. And then he also decided that it would be a good idea to start on antidepressants and maybe something to help with his anxiety. So he went to the psychiatrist and kind of explained his issues he was having. You know, I'm having panic attacks, I'm depressed, and I have trouble focusing. So his doctor prescribed him ADHD medication, antidepressants, and an anti-anxiety medication. He did the right thing. You know, when you're going through something, everyone tells you, like, find help, go seek help. It can be really hard when you're struggling with mental health issues to make that step and to go get help. But he did, and he did the right thing. And it hurts a lot because his intentions were so pure. He just wanted help. He just wanted to get better, and he just got worse. The anti-anxiety medication that was prescribed to him was for when he was having a panic attack. It wasn't something he took daily. He was only supposed to take it when there was no other way for him to calm down in the middle of a panic attack. But they were highly addictive, because when you have anxiety and you have all these thoughts kind of going through your head all the time, you know, you'll do anything to shut those thoughts off. And so it's very easy to become addicted to anti-anxiety medication. You crave to just not have to worry about things for just a second, just to have that peace. And then at the same time, the ADHD medication was kind of addictive, because you take it and you have all this energy to do all the things you need to do in your day. So he'd take it and he'd clean the house and he'd be kind of manic, and when he was distracted with all these little things that he was now able to focus on, it kind of took away from his anxious and depressing thoughts, and it just kind of distracts you from your issues and makes you focus on other things. So he got into this pattern of waking up in the morning and taking his ADHD medication to wake him up, and he felt awake and ready for the day, and he got a ton of stuff done during the day and felt really good and happy and productive. But another thing about ADHD medication is it can kind of have some side effects when it starts to wear off, and you kind of come down from that high and you're just kind of depressed and sad and kind of the opposite. You have no motivation, and it just kind of really hits you hard when your medicine wears off. But then he had his anti-anxiety medication, so it was like, okay, well, I'm not feeling.
So I have never personally taken any medication for any of my issues myself, and I don't blame people that do. I can see that trend of you're on that high, so you're fine, but then it dips because it goes away, and then all of a sudden you're generally wasted. This is harsh because there is nothing that I can think of that could have been done differently so far. Nothing. And that's painful to hear because it just means that there is no way around the current events that have been currently transpiring that she's been saying. Everything she said so far, I don't even see if there was a way to change. At least so far. But no, everything, she's right. He did the right thing. He sought out help. And help is very much needed if you need the help. And I just think, guys, that just sucks. I know Emily is a little bit more abrasive, and I don't mean this in a negative way, as in she's much more involved and less hands-off than these, well, you know what I mean. Because she was referring to how she would give him space. Well, Emily does not allow space for me. Only to a certain degree, but she will never really allow for it too much. And the reason for it is because she's constantly worried about me and what I could do if she is not there to see it through with me. So, and I think this is fears from the past when I was more active in trying to, so it sucks because, I can understand why she took a step back. She was just trying to respect his space. But I also understand the other side with Emily not respecting my space to a certain degree because of fears of stuff like this happening. So, let's continue.
Feeling great. Let me take this medicine to kind of calm myself down, and it makes you sleepy and drowsy, so he'd take that to relax and be able to get to sleep. Because another thing that the ADHD medication affected was being able to sleep. It makes you awake and it stays in your system for a while. Yeah. So when you do finally lay down to get to bed, you're physically exhausted, your body is really tired from everything you did that day, but your brain is still going really fast. Yeah. So it was kind of a lethal mixture of these two very strong, heavy drugs, both very addicting, and he just kind of fell into a hole. He needed the uppers to get up in the morning and the downers to slow down at night. And the more downers he took at night, the more uppers he needed to wake himself up. And the more uppers he took during the day, the more downers he needed to go to bed. So it was a very, very vicious cycle, and he just kept taking more and more and more and needing more for his body to feel the effects. And it was very unhealthy. His ADHD medication also made him lose a lot of weight. You don't really get very hungry when you take that. Your appetite really slows down, so he really wasn't eating very much and was just really sickly and just not doing well. And for a while, I wasn't even aware that he was abusing his medications. I thought, the doctor gave that to him. Like, it can't hurt. Why would a doctor prescribe that if it was bad for him? But as things progressed and I really started to see, and then at that point ask him, like, how much are you taking of this? I realized that he had a problem. But at that point, he was so far into it that it was really hard to just stop.
As she's saying, she definitely wasn't aware. And I worry because I know people in my life that have taken ADHD medication, and it's very true. Your appetite goes down significantly. And one of the things that I've seen is that parents, especially those that are trying to help their child. Now, this is a different situation, but I'm just saying, the parents that are helping their children with ADHD and are taking those medications, that are noticing loss of appetite, they will still ask their kid to like eat a certain amount, regardless of hungry or not, because they are aware that the medication has some side effects. It's not applicatory for everyone, but these are some side effects that you can see. And I know about these because I've seen it myself. And I wish someone was monitoring his daily intake of medication, because that could have greatly changed the outcome. But I don't really think it's her fault at all. There's no one to blame here. This is not a blame game. Not at all.
He depended on those drugs to function. He would try to stop, but he would wake up and he would feel like crap and super groggy.
Addiction.
He would spend hours trying to fall asleep at night. And no matter how many times he tried fixing it on his own, it never worked.
Exactly.
All the while, I'm going through pregnancy. Towards the end of my pregnancy, I started to go through depression, which hadn't been a problem for me for many, many years. It's been about 5 years since I dealt with that, but that started to kind of creep back in. It just became really hard for us to function in our day-to-day lives. I was super pregnant and depressed and didn't want to get out of bed, and Landon was obviously going through his struggles and withdrawals and getting back on the drugs and trying to get off. It was just a lot at once. And then Delilah was born, and for a little while, we were both really happy, and it was almost like a light at the end of the tunnel. We'd been struggling for a while, and we just got to feel the bliss of having a new baby. But after bringing her home and now having 2 kids and dealing with that adjustment, it really hit us hard, and it was like almost worse than it was before. So at that point, I made the decision to take a break from YouTube. I felt that there was no way for us to get the help we need and get better while trying to make videos and be happy, and it was just mentally exhausting filming videos. First of all, knowing that honestly behind the scenes we were struggling. Not to say that it was all fake, but you know, there was times where we had to put on a happy face. We did only show the good parts, which at the time it didn't really seem like there was many good parts.
That's the thing about YouTube, right? Sometimes you don't show the negative sides. I mean, even with my stuff, you guys don't see the negative sides of my life. Like, you know, I try to be as transparent and open about things like that. But it's still hard to show every negative side because, I mean, not many people actively look for negative stories, at least in the sense of the YouTuber they're watching. They don't want to hear about, or at least not everyone wants to hear about how you had a fight, or how this happened or that's happened, or how like you just had a bad day. People are there to kick back and relax and enjoy themselves, and if you're not providing that, then they don't want to watch it. And fair enough. I honestly understand why she would stop YouTube altogether for a while, at least take a break from it. It makes sense. I get it. It just sucks. It's honestly, this is unfortunate. So.
But we just focused on Colette and just being the best we can for her and doing the best we can to film videos and provide for our family and keep you guys in the loop. But it hit a point where we couldn't do that anymore.
Yeah, this is a unique situation.
We needed real help, and I just knew that if we were gonna get it, we couldn't continue to do YouTube. During that time.
Yeah, because they have a pregnancy plus a mental health issue.
Break. Like I said,
wombo
Landon
combo.
isn't
That's
one
hard
to really
to deal with.
share
So
that kind of stuff
I understand
with
their
everyone,
reasoning to stop.
I just kind of put it on me, which I was
focus on
having
the
my
other
issues, but it was really Landon as well. So Landon went up to Dallas to be with his parents during that time and to just really focus on himself and his mental health and getting clean off the drugs and just completely wiping it out of his system, which is really, really hard. And you deal with withdrawals, and he just needed to be around family at that time. Being around the kids while trying to deal with what he was dealing with just wasn't productive. So I took the kids to Florida because, you know, with a brand new baby, I was only 1 month postpartum. Taking care of them by myself wasn't the best option for me. I needed to be around family and get help with the kids because I was also dealing with my issues.
100%.
So he was working on his mental health in Dallas with his family. I was with my family working on my mental health. And it was really hard. We missed each other a lot. We talked to each other every day. We called each other. But we just knew it was what was best for the both of us and what we needed. And
one other thing I want to mention here is this is anecdotal, meaning this is just someone else's experience and this is not factual what I'm about to say. So don't take this as this applies to everybody. I'm not a mental health practitioner. I cannot, prescribe medication. I cannot say what is factually correct here. I have a friend who struggled with withdrawal, struggled with addiction, and the way that they ended up handling it was going to a mental health institution. And what they would do over there, specifically for his case, and I'm only saying for his case because this is just this one particular case, and I'm not speaking for everyone. They would give him what he was addicted to, but at lower dosages, smaller dosages, day by day or week by week, until he was basically entirely non-dependent on it. And that's how they handled it. I can't speak for everyone else or how it really is done for every single situation. Hence why I've said this is only applicable to my friend's story and no one else's. Because I personally have never dealt with addiction. So it's not my place to say what was right or wrong here. Because I don't know.
Slowly started to see him just doing a lot better, having a lot better attitude about things. And he seemed to be doing really well in Dallas with his family. And when we felt like we were ready, we went back to Austin together, back to our home. I was feeling a lot better as far as, postpartum depression goes. I was eating really well. I was cooking for us every night. Before we were too depressed to even cook, we would order DoorDash a lot of the time. But I was cooking and being healthy and working out and drinking water and just developing good habits that made me feel a lot better. And for a while, Landon was a part of that too. We would take the girls to the park every day.
That's very true.
Talk to each other a lot more, spending a lot less time on our phones. We were both going to therapy and journaling.
Oh, that's
and it
fantastic.
Really seemed like things were getting a lot better. He had not taken any kind of drugs since he went to Dallas. He called his psychiatrist and told him, look, I'm addicted to these. I need you to stop prescribing it to me. The only thing he stayed on was the antidepressant. So he was no longer on either of his ADHD medication or his anxiety medication. And he was already just looking a lot better physically and eating.
Yeah, so one thing I want to mention here is that when you're depressed, when you're actually depressed, you don't feel like doing anything. And the answer to that is doing things and being productive. But the problem with that is that it's a vicious cycle. You cannot be productive when you have no feelings of wanting to do anything because you feel worthless. You feel so bad that the only thing you can really do is do nothing. And that's the worst feeling because I've gone through it so many times, and that's when I would do nothing. Absolutely nothing. And Emily would have to basically be there and baby me and just to support me through all of that. And, finding something to do that, not to keep your mind off things, but because you genuinely love it, is how I managed not to overcome, but to balance my depression, because it doesn't go away. Even with all this streaming and YouTube, it's still here. It's here to stay. It's part of my life. But I manage it through my work and through the fun activities that I get to do. and just being with Emily, because I just don't want to make anyone sad, but I also don't want to be a burden. And it's a tough balance. I just hope that people understand that telling someone with depression to go and exercise, to go and make yourself feel better, is not the way to help someone. You're actively making it worse. So just staying with them and asking them questions, asking them, do they want to try this tomorrow? Set schedules. Set schedules with the person, especially if you're family. Set a schedule or a day to go out with them and do something. Because I can promise you, doing that, you have a much better likelihood, a much better chance of, when you set those habits that way and schedule what you're going to do, you're going to see better results than if you just try to do it spontaneously. On the go, you're not going to get much out of someone like myself, for example, while it's happening.
More, and it just really seemed like things were looking up, and we were just about ready to get back into our normal routine and filming videos again. And then on August 13th, I went out with a friend for lunch. So he was kind of left alone with the girls for a little bit that day. I just went shopping with my friend. I came back home and I bought him a ton of shirts, and I was showing him all the shirts I bought for him, and he seemed like he was having a good day, and he was excited for me to be back home and to hang out with him. And so I cooked dinner, and we ate, and we were just having our normal night routine. We put Colette to bed together, we read her a book, and then we went to our room, and we were just kind of talking, and I could tell that something was wrong. And he said he was sorry for everything he put me through. It was really hard on me when I was pregnant, and he was heavy in his addiction, and he just really wasn't himself during that time, and he was just apologizing to me for everything. And I could just tell he was putting a lot of blame on himself. And I talked to him, and I told him that I loved him and that I forgave him, and things are different now, and we're on a new path. And I gave him a hug and a kiss and told him I love him and that it's okay, and that no matter what he ever did, I would always love him and be here for him. And there's nothing that he could do to make me stop loving him. And after that, he seemed okay, and I thought I helped, and we just kind of continued on with our night. And he said he was going to have a bath, which he does.
This is very reminiscent to what I do. I put all of the blame on myself all the time. All of the time. There's not a single moment in my life where I don't actively blame myself for everything that goes wrong in my relationship with Emily, or just in my life in general. It's hard, because you feel like you're letting the one person that cares about you completely down, and you don't know how the person feels. You only know how you feel. You feel alone. Even though everyone is there, they might be supporting you. They might think that, you feel like they're there, but when I feel the way I feel like I'm completely alone, even when Emily's there. And that's a shame, because it's not true. So if you feel like you're alone, but you have people in your life that are supporting you, try to remember that. I'm actively trying that every single day. And it's going to be tough, and there will be days where you won't think that, and that's okay. Just make sure that no matter what you do, that you try to latch onto that feeling of, yeah, somebody is there for me. Someone is there looking out for me. And it's hard, because I really do believe sometimes that I'm a burden on Emily, that I make her life miserable. And it's partially true, but it's less true than how much better her life is with me here. And I'm not saying that as a way to boost myself up. I'm saying that because I genuinely believe that that's what she would think too. I mean, that's what she's told me a lot at the times, that, even with all the struggles that we go through between her and I, she is much happier. I'm much happier when we're together.
Every night before bed, and he knew that I wouldn't question it, you know? So he leaves the room, and I'm just kind of sitting there waiting for him to get out. About 30 minutes later, I kind of hear Colette start to wake up and toss around. So I go to her room, and I check on her. And I open the door, and I tell her, you know, go back to bed. And then I'm like, Landon's been in the bath for a while. I'm going to check on him. And I go to the bathroom, and the bath is empty. It didn't look like he had a bath whatsoever. And so I checked all the rooms. He wasn't in the bathroom. I checked Colette's room again because maybe, you know, he was in there with her snuggling, because he does that. He'll go in her room and just snuggle with her sometimes. And I thought maybe I just missed it and I didn't see him in there, but I checked and he wasn't there. And our house is pretty small. You know, I checked everywhere he could be. And then I went into the garage. And when I opened the garage, I saw him, he had hung himself, and he didn't look alive. He was very pale, and I was in so much shock, and it took me a second to realize that it was actually happening. And I ran to the kitchen, and I grabbed a knife, and I came back, and I cut him down. And I called 911, and I told them where I was and what happened. And I laid him down, and I checked if he had a pulse, and he didn't. And there was just nothing there at all. He was not there. He was dead. I knew at that moment that he was gone. There is no words to describe how I felt at that time. Very few people will ever understand. And if you do understand what that is like, I'm sorry to you, because no one should have to.
I have to stop right there because I have a friend who did precisely this. So I understand. I just wasn't there to cut that. I wasn't there. I didn't even know until after the fact, when I went to his funeral. And Emily was there for this friend's funeral, and we wouldn't have guessed. We wouldn't have known. But I've carried this man's name at the back of my head for the longest time, because it's been a while now since it happened. But I won't forget his name. I refuse to forget him, and I refuse to forget every moment I've spent with this man. I was destroyed. So I understand, but only from the level of loss, and not even maybe even the same level, because you can't compare levels of loss. You can't. Everyone feels differently about certain loss. Everyone reacts differently to loss. There is no comparison. But what we do have is an understanding that that loss destroys you. It can get better over time, but it doesn't change the fact that it happened, and it doesn't feel real. It really doesn't, trust me. It doesn't hit you until it hits you, and even when it hits you, you just, well, you know it's real. You just don't know what to do about it. You feel helpless. There is no control. So I understand what she's saying here, because I've gone through loss many times, and my heart goes out to her.
Experienced that, and then the ambulance got there, and a police officer escorted me out of the garage and told me that I shouldn't be in there. And then Colette was up again, and she was banging on her door and screaming, and Delilah started crying. I was shaking, and there was nothing I could do. I felt so helpless, and I started making calls because I knew all of our family was far, and they just need to get there as soon as possible. So I called my parents, and I called his parents. It didn't feel real until I called his mom, and I heard the terror in her voice as I told her what happened. And she asked me if he's dead, and I said, I don't know. They're working on him, but I don't know. And she was screaming and crying, and And then an EMT comes in and tells me that he has a pulse. They got a pulse back, and they were taking him to the hospital. And then I called a friend to come over and watch the kids so I can go to the hospital. It felt like it took hours for them to come. In reality, it probably wasn't that long, but I sat there waiting for them so I can go and be with him. And they finally got there, and I got a ride to the hospital. And my friend drove me to the hospital, and he was saying, there's lots of programs for him for when he wakes up, and, we're gonna be with you through all this, and he'll be okay. And he kept talking about, when he wakes up. And I'm just like, he's dead. Like, I saw him, like, he's not waking up. I got to the hospital, and they wouldn't let me see him at first. And his doctor came in and explained, very particular with the words he chose to use, not to give me false hope, but not to tell me that he was gone yet. And they had an investigator talk to me, and they were questioning me about how it all went down. And then I saw him, to see him with a tube down his throat and all these wires and IVs. It's not the way you want to see someone you love, but at least he looked more alive. And he looked like my Landon, and he was warm. He wasn't just cold and pale. I just held his hand, and then they took him up to his hospital room in the ICU, and I was just numb. They had me in the waiting room while they got him set up in there, and I was just sitting there just staring at the floor, and I was just in such disbelief. And then my brain started going to places like, if I would have got up and checked on him a little bit sooner, maybe he'd be okay, and just all the what ifs of how it could have gone differently. And I told myself, everyone's gonna be so mad at me, because I felt like it was my fault. And I was so sure that his parents were gonna come in and yell at me and be mad at me for not checking on him sooner. And I just put so much blame on myself, just thinking about all the ways that the day could have gone differently. And maybe if I didn't go out with my friend that day, or maybe if I had talked to him a little bit longer when he was telling me how sorry he was for everything. And then his parents got there, and I was so nervous. And they just came up and gave me a hug and said, it's gonna be okay. And his mom went back to see him in his hospital room, and she wasn't there for very long. She came back and she said she just couldn't do it. It was really hard to see. And then his dad got there. I've never seen his son cry. And just seeing him break down was so hard. And all these emotions just kept coming in waves, for being in a state of shock and just staring off and disassociating myself from reality, and snapping back and realizing the situation and that it's real and that this isn't a dream, and just seeing everyone crying. I went back in the room with him, and I was holding his hand, and he would squeeze it, and then his eyes would flutter open just for a second, and it gave me a lot of hope, because, he's moving. He's opening his eyes, and I was talking to him, and I was saying, Landon, open your eyes, like, I'm right here, it's me, it's Cameron, squeeze my hand. And at that point I thought for a second, maybe he's not gone, and maybe he's gonna wake up. And then the doctor sits us down and says that they did an MRI, and his brain didn't look severely damaged, but they said that it was likely just because they did it so early, right after it happened, that his brain is still in the process of shutting down. And the fact that he was moving just meant that his neurons were all just kind of firing off at once before they just completely died out. So it wasn't really him there. It was just his body having a reaction. Doctors have a certain way, though, of wording things where they won't really give you an answer. So he told us all that, but at the same time, he kind of worded it in a way that it's very much, a possibility, and they're unsure, and they're gonna have to wait and see. But at that point, I think we all kind of knew. And I just remember feeling that hope when I thought for a second that he might be okay. I wish I could go back to when I felt hope. I wish I could go back to just an hour earlier before he told us that I thought it was a good sign, and I thought it meant he was waking up. Ignorance is bliss, I guess. And to at least feel a little bit of hope is all I needed at that time. And then I just had none. And everyone around me, and my family and his family, they were all kind of like, let's pray, let's have hope. There's hope. And I just knew that there wasn't any hope of him waking up. I found him and he was dead. And you don't really come back from that. After your brain goes so long without oxygen, I knew that he was gone. And it was really hard hearing everyone say, I'm praying and he's gonna wake up, have faith, he's gonna wake up. Because the last thing I wanted was to get my hopes up again, just to be crushed. So from then on out, I just kind of started accepting it. I started mourning him, and having those thoughts like he was actually gone. Just really trying to wrap my head around all of it. 1 second he's there, the next he's in a hospital bed. I had to leave the hospital eventually, and take a shower, and check on the girls, and just do something other than sitting in the waiting room crying. But I couldn't go back to the house. It was so hard. And I had to go back to pack a bag. And every single thing I owned, everything we owned, it just had a memory attached to it. And it just all reminded me of him. And I remember when we bought that together, and he loved that shirt, and it was just so hard going in there. And then the thought of even walking by the garage door. But I got my stuff, and I went to a hotel, and I stayed there for that week. And then on August 18th, after just kind of waiting around for days to hear a final answer, we got it. And there's only one person.
I just want to say that seeing her and how she completely feels, how devastated she feels. Emily.
Yeah.
I just want to say I'm very sorry for making you so scared all the time.
It's not your fault.
And for attempting. No, I don't want to hear anything. I just want to say I'm sorry because I see her and it scares me on how you would have felt if I had managed. So I'm sorry, okay? I'm not much of a crier, so I can cry, but I'm trying my best not to, because this is an emotional video. So I like I said, I strongly suggest you watch this with a family member or someone, so that way you can brunt the impact of this together, because this is a very heavy topic and it's a painful one.
Loud in the hospital room at a time, and I just happened to be the one in there with him when the doctor came in, and he sat me down. He said they ran all the tests, and they tested his brain function and his brain waves and his MRI again, and at 2:22 they pronounced him brain dead, and my heart just sank. And I knew pretty much that whole week that was gonna happen at some point.
Yeah.
But to actually hear it.
But there's always hope.
And know it.
Yeah.
It was really hard. And so I called his parents up.
Once it's real,
and his
it's
brother,
impossible to
and they came up. And
stop
I
feeling
told
that
them
feeling of
that
dread
he was gone.
destruction,
and
destroyed.
I just cried over him and prayed and
Yeah.
talked to him, even though he
Yeah.
wasn't really there. But and then after we all kind of had a second with him, we walk outside and someone stops me and says, "We need to talk with you. Come to this room." And they set us up in a conference room, and they said Landon was registered to donate his organs, and they read me off the list of all the organs that he chose to donate, and he donated everything. He wanted to save as many people as possible, and I wasn't surprised to hear that he was an organ donor. He is just such a compassionate, loving, caring person, and he always put others above himself. So even in death, he was caring about other people. And so they explained that they would spend the next 24 hours trying to gather information on all of his organs and finding recipients, and that the next day he would have a surgery where they would cut off his life support and then harvest his organs. So his family said goodbye to him that day. They had to head back to Dallas to start making funeral arrangements. So they said their goodbyes and they left. And then the next morning before his surgery, I went out there and I said my final goodbyes to him. And it was so hard because, like I said, like, he was warm and his chest was moving and he was breathing. Even though it was on machine, he was breathing and he looked alive, even though he wasn't. And it was really hard to see him with all the tubes and everything. So I just held him and I closed my eyes so I wouldn't have to see him like that. And I just thought about him as the happy Landon that I know, with this smile and those dimples. And I just hugged him and I just told him how much I loved him. And then I'd stop hugging him and then I'd hug him again because I knew eventually it would have to be the last one. I had to say goodbye at some point. I couldn't just hug him forever. And so I would just hug him and then I'd be like, okay, it's time to go. This is it. But then I couldn't, and I turned around and I hugged him again and again. And then eventually it was the last one and I left. And that's the last time I saw him. And as much as I knew he wasn't really there, his body was there. And that was the smile I fell in love with, and the hands I held, and the hair that I would run my fingers through, and the forehead that I would kiss, and the eyes that I would stare into. And that's the man I fell in love with. And then the last time I would see him. And all throughout his stay at the hospital, there was little signs of him and little things that just reminded me that he was there, even though he wasn't. I think his spirit was still there. We got married on the 22nd of June, and he was in room 22, and they announced him brain dead at 2:22, so that number just kind of kept popping up, and I didn't really know what to make of it, but it just felt like a sign. But I walked away from room 22. It was the hardest goodbye I've ever had to say. When something like this happens, there's a lot of questions that will never be answered. Everyone asks why. I looked for a note. There was no note, no explanation, but I know him very well. And so after having a lot of time to think about it and process it, I've been able to kind of piece it together in my head. And I'll never truly know the answer, but I know Landon, and I know he was not thinking rationally. He's a very impulsive person, he always has been, and he does things without thinking. And I think he felt guilty about how everything has gone for the past year, and I think he just felt like a burden, and like we'd be better off without him, which is so far from the truth. And I wish he would have known that. I'm heartbroken. Colette is confused. There is no way that we're better off without him. I think he just felt like a burden though, and like he was holding me back from being happy, which wasn't true. He had a suicidal thought. I think he convinced himself that that's what needed to happen, and he just said, Landon, if you don't just do it, you never will. You're gonna talk yourself out of it. You can't think about it another second. You just need to do it. And he did. And he didn't think about it. Because I know that if he would have thought about it he would have thought about the fact that I'd be the one to find him. And he would have thought about all the hurt he would cause me. And he would have thought about his daughters growing up without him. And he would have thought about everyone who would be hurt by this. And he wouldn't have done it if he would have thought about it more. Because he is such a compassionate.
Yeah, it's so true, though. It's so true. Every time I thought about it, I backed out. Not because I was scared, but because it, rationally speaking, it would destroy people. The one time where I didn't think, Emily helped me back. If it weren't for Emily, I probably wouldn't be here today. So let that sink in. If it weren't for Emily, I wouldn't be here today. And it's crazy because this happens. This is not something that doesn't happen often. There's a lot of people that die by suicide. And it's because we don't talk about this enough.
He's a loving person, and he cares about everyone else before himself. And the last thing he would want is for any of us to feel this way. And if he knew everything that would follow after he did what he did, he wouldn't have. And that's why I'm here to tell his story, because there are so many people out there who need to hear about what comes after. They think, you know, if I do it, if I kill myself, I won't have to deal with all that. It's not my problem. And a lot of people think that way. But I know deep down that you care about your loved ones. And I know Landon did. And you need to think about that before you do it. Think about who's gonna have to find you. Think about everyone who loves you. And not just that, oh yeah, they'd miss me. No, they'd be heartbroken.
I have to stop right here for a little bit. She's absolutely right. After my attempt, where Emily stopped me, I've had only 2 other incidents where I thought and almost went through with it. But each time was because I thought of that moment. I thought of that moment where I was screaming and crying in pain, and she was just there holding on to me. And then the other 2 times after that where I thought and was going to go through with it, I stopped. I immediately stopped and thought about that because, yeah, once you really sit down and think about it, if there's even one person in your life that knows you, you will destroy their life. And the worst part is there's no one to blame here, because you know what? This is not a blame game type of situation. This is just how sometimes this happens. But you need to realize that if you're struggling, if you need help, talk to somebody. Talk to somebody that will listen to you, because this is devastating. And I can't imagine what I would have put my family through, what I would put anybody through if I had succeeded in my attempts.
Broken. They would cry themselves to sleep. You need to think about that. It's easier to just not, and to just do what he did, and do it before you can stop yourself, before you can go there, before you can think those thoughts. And I think he knew deep down that if he went there and if he thought about that he wouldn't do it. And he was just in such a dark place that he was so convinced that it's what needed to happen. He just had so much more life to live. He had so much ahead of him. And now, every time that I experience Colette learning something new, or the next holiday, or the next sunset, or the next beautiful thing in life, I'm gonna be thinking, he should be here to see that. And you need to think about the fact that if you do go through with it, there's so many beautiful things in life that you're gonna miss. All I ask of you is that you just think twice. I know in the moment life can just seem so overwhelming and like it's the only solution, but it's not. Other solutions might seem harder, but suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. You will get through it, and you will be happy one day. and it is never, ever, ever the right answer. I hope his story sticks with you. I hope the story of all that he's left behind sticks with you, and I hope that you remember it in a time of need. Thank you for all the support and love during this time. It means a lot to see all the people who loved him, and I know that he's looking down from heaven and he sees the love, he feels the love. If you love someone, let them know. Hug them a little tighter for me. Cherish them, because life is so short and you never know what can happen. And just be grateful for what you have, because I would give anything to be able to hug Landon right now. Life is just so, so precious. I love you guys. Thank you. And his legacy will live on, and his story will be heard.
So final thoughts. Final thoughts on this. It's a reaction, as more so than a reaction. She's right. Cherish your time here as best as you can. Make sure to, spend time with people and don't take people for granted. You don't know what happens the next day. You can't know. So enjoy every moment you can with the people that you love. Once again, this video, just like a lot of my other videos, and especially with React videos like these, I hope I never see anyone trying to monetize this stuff, because that's heartless. If you're reacting to this type of video, you better not be putting ads or any type of monetization, because that's someone's life. And I say that because we need to be critical. I'm doing this because I want to talk about this topic, because there's a lot of you guys, my viewers, my particular viewers. I know a lot of you do struggle with depression. I know a lot of you do struggle with a lot of anxiety or other mental health issues. And I just want you to know that we need to talk about them, because I have dealt with some viewers in the past with that have these issues. And I don't mean dealt as in like I tried to just push them aside. I mean, I actually tried to work with them as best as I could from my ability, because I'm not I'm not there really, but I'm there. And I just wanted to let any of my viewers know, or any new viewers that just somehow stumble in, that if you need to talk, my door is always open. Or in this case, my social media, my Discord, everything else, my YouTube, my private messaging, whatever, okay? You are able to talk to me. I'm always an open door for that. I want to know if something happens. But I hope nothing happens, because that would suck. Just want you guys to know that I'm there for you, always. Whether you have your highs and your lows, I'm going to always stick it out with you guys. As best as I'm able to, of course. This is definitely a video that is a lot different from my regular content, but I think this is a video that needs to be made, because like I said, we don't talk about depression enough, we don't talk about suicide enough, we don't talk about things that scare us enough. And I think the best way to deal with these type of situations, and the best way to improve these sort of situations, is to be able to talk. Because all I heard was that he kept it to himself. And that could be part of his personality. And that could also be part of like just not his environment necessarily, but like globally the environment. So we're not talking about his family life. We're not talking about this guy's home life. We're talking about just social stigmas. I can't speak on his behalf, but I know on my end, social stigma was a huge thing as to why I couldn't talk about how I felt, why I couldn't talk about how I was struggling. And ever since I had gone to therapy, that I really got better. Just be aware, to my viewers, to new people that are here, just to anyone really, there is always hope. Or better to say, there's always another way. I truly believe that. And I hope that you remember these words if you're ever feeling there is no other way. Because there's always a better solution. Anyways, that's the end of the video. Hope you guys have a proper discussion about this with whomever you watch this with. Or if you haven't watched it with anyone other than me, talk to me then, please, about it so we can have that discussion. I hope you guys have a great day.